today we'll be talking about 6 approaches to integrating media in your classroom. And it's a framework that was developed by PBS to support our youngest learners to use digital tools in a meaningful way. We're going to go through 2 of the 6. We'll talk about the whole 6, and then we'll talk through 2 of them. And each of the 3 workshops is devoted to 2 of these approaches. And so today we're going to talk about Spark and Share. We'll talk about some tools that can be used to meet both of those approaches. Traci gets to do most of the talking, but that's awesome and to your advantage because Traci has so many great experiences and she's got some awesome examples that she can show you. And then, like any workshop like this, we hope that it inspires you to get your hands on some of the tools we're sharing and try things out. So we'll have a period of time where we stop talking and we ask you to just turn off your camera and play around and explore some of the tools. And then we'll bring you back and have you talk about what that was like for you. And then we'll share some of our Montana PBS professional development opportunities, give you some prizes and send you on your way. We hope we can be done within maybe before the 2 hours is up. No one usually gets mad at me if we end early. And we always aim for that without going too fast and overwhelming people. Traci, anything to add before I jump into these?
No, I think you got it, girl.
All right, we've done this a time or 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Traci and I did this series in the winter, and so maybe you came for that. You're going to see a lot of similarities between the 2, but we are sharing different tools in this series than we did in the winter. But this piece of it is the same. And like I said, this is the 6 approaches to media integration, which is a media literacy framework that PBS Kids developed with some curriculum experts and the National Association for Media Literacy and Education. And it was mainly in response to some research and some anecdotal feedback that they got from elementary teachers and early childhood experts about concerns around screen time with our youngest learners, concerns about the meaningful use of digital tools, and perhaps the overconsumption of media in classrooms. And so they developed these approaches to really offer some guidance for teachers to think about how they could use technology in a way that's meaningful and meets learning goals, but also really enriches learning. Traci and I both, when we were teaching in our classrooms using tech, neither of us were into just giving the kid the iPad and having him sit in the corner and look at the screen all day. That wasn't how we did business. But I think sometimes that's the impression people get when they see technology in the classroom. And I always said technology is another tool, like our pencils and our markers. And we have times that we pick it up and we use it. And then we have lots of times where we put it down and it's not the best tool for our learning. But I think that these approaches really help us think about what we do when we do pick it up. And so they are Spark, Model, Explore, Create, Document, and Share. I think we've got this document in this chat box. I like to have it, I don't have it anymore, I don't know why. I like to have it printed and on the wall to help me while I'm thinking things through. And I think because it's on the other side of my door, that's why I can't see it right now. And usually I reference it a lot because I was one that I would learn about a new tool at a conference or in a workshop and instantly just be like super excited and want to try it right away and like jump right in and not really think about whether or not it was a good tool or if it was going to be effective. Like I definitely was impulsive in the early days of using technology.
Nowhere.
Totally. But I think this helped me to kind of put it in one of these categories and to really be more intentional about what I was doing. So today we'll talk about Spark and Share, and I'll be talking about Spark and giving you some ideas from the PBS world specifically for Spark. And then Traci's going to go through Share and how digital tools can be used for sharing. Traci, do you want to add to that?
Um, I just, as you were talking, I was just reading that media literacy piece at the top. I think I skim over that so often. And so I just kind of want to call out that little definition there of media literacy at the top of that document. I think so many times I'm working with teachers, and like you said, the screen time piece, I think that they're on their devices too much. And I really do think sometimes we think it's extra, right? But I do think that there are some foundational skills here, like that literacy piece, right? Like learning how to use some of these tools is a new literacy. Like our kids, as they grow up, are going to be utilizing devices and utilizing tools and that sort of thing. And so that really just kind of caught my attention this morning, just really honing in on what is media literacy. And again, like Nikki said, just being really intentional about the way that we're utilizing these things in our classroom to help our students become media literate, not just because it's fun or cool or new or whatever. But that really just kind of grabbed my attention today.
Yes, well said. So Spark is the one that I'll be talking about. And so that's just using media to get people excited, which is my favorite. It's really my favorite because, and it's so easy. Like media is such a natural tool for getting people excited. And that was the thing that blew me away the first time I had technology in my classroom. I have a picture of four kids, their heads bent over an iPad that I show during these presentations sometimes. And I remember watching from across the room because when I started, I only had one iPad in the room, and it was one I just got. I wrote a grant, and it was like, let's see what happens when we start using this. And so I had the iPad set up as a center, and I had looked over, and there's these four heads bent over the screen, and they were fascinated, like incredibly engaged in this screen and what was happening. And I remember thinking, there is absolutely nothing that I've done in, at that point, my decade of classroom teaching that had inspired that level of engagement. Like there is something to this for getting kids excitement. I remember one of the first silly little videos I made about the parts of a plant, and I did just a silly little whiteboard video where I drew a plant and then did some voiceover over it. And it was honestly the same thing that I do in person for them every day, but I played this video, and the attention and the interest in that video, it was almost offensive, really, that they were more interested in a video of me teaching them about the parts of the plant than they were when I did it live and in person. But it was really, truly captured their interest because it was video and it was in front of them. So that's where we're going to talk about Spark today, and some of the content and some of the tools that can be used to spark interest and spark curiosity in a topic or in an activity that you're planning to do. And so if you've been with me before, you've heard me talk about PBS Learning Media. And so if you have, just enjoy hearing about it again. If you haven't, hopefully this will be a nice new piece of information. PBS Learning Media is a content website for K-12 teachers, actually pre-K through 12 teachers, to find content to use in their classrooms. It was developed in about 2011 in response to some market research that showed that teachers were using PBS Media in their classrooms, and it has grown over the years. That it's basically PBS programs, documentaries that are packaged for classroom use. It's all free and aligned to standards. Most of it is video, but there are photos and interactives and digital games and audio files, all really vetted and made with care and with the same editorial standards that all PBS content for broadcast is made with, but made with classroom in mind. It's a great place to go and find a video of something that your students wouldn't normally experience close up. Living in Montana, if we want kids to see the ocean, we can't take them to the ocean. We have to do the next best thing and have them explore it using media or using books or things like that. So one of the projects on PBS Learning Media is something that my team and I have been working on for the last 3 years. And that is a collection of materials about the Montana state parks. we started this project with this idea that we wanted to create content specifically for Montana classrooms that was only for teachers and students, not for an audience that was going to be watching TV. And so I hired graduate students from MSU and UM to work for me. And so I have 2 film students and 2 education students that collaborate to develop materials for the website. And one of the things that we have been doing is we wanted to develop materials that teachers could use to get their students interested in visiting the state parks. We knew that a lot of teachers were taking field trips to the parks, but often those field trips didn't have context before and after that made them really meaningful. And so we worked with teachers and we worked with students and developed this collection of materials that we hope inspires kids and students to visit the parks either with their families or with their schools. And so I'm going to navigate to the site right now so you can see how to find it. I think the team is putting it in the chat box for you too. But the first thing you do is you go to pbslearningmedia.org, and this is what the website looks like. Most teachers, when they get here, they type something in the topics box. So since I'm doing Parks of Montana, you could type in one of the parks you'd be visiting, and it pops up here. And this first thumbnail is the collection. We have gone to 6 different parks. There are 55, we've done 6, small percentage, but it takes about a year to get a single park documented. So I think we're doing pretty well. We've got 6 parks, and I think we have a pretty good map of the state represented with these resources. We started with Lewis and Clark Caverns right here in Southwest Montana. We added Makoshika out there in Eastern Montana in Glendive. I saw someone from Glendive on the call. And then we also added the Flathead Park, and those were the first 3 that we did. Then we added First Peoples Buffalo Jump over in the Great Falls area. And this year, hot off the presses, just published a week ago, we've newly published Pictograph Cave State Park and Milltown State Park. And those of you in the Billings area probably know about Pictograph Cave. And then Milltown is over outside of Missoula. And so I want to show you, since we have so many Billings and Eastern Montana represented, I want to show you the Pictograph Caves videos. Each park has a collection of 4 videos meant to spark interest and curiosity about the park. The first one is this overview video that is just a minute and a half, and it's just like exactly what it says. It's an overview of the park and what you would learn if you visited there. The next one goes a little bit more in depth on what pictographs are and how they were discovered and some of the history behind them. This one is we call Wandering Wonders, which is a longer video about just over 15 minutes of drone footage set to music that really gives you a nice look at the landscape of the park. And our vision behind this was an opportunity to maybe have some quiet time in your classroom and kids need to work on other things, or you have a transition that you just need everybody to slow down and focus on something, but also to look a little longer at the landscape of the park and have some discussions around what they see and what they might see, whether it's before a visit or after a visit. And then the last one is a photo gallery that goes through 4 or 5 photos of the park that you can do some visual literacy and discussion around. Again, but getting kids excited to go and visit so they arrive at their field trip or their visit with some context and some background, and then giving you some follow-up activities that you can do. Every resource, I'll click on the overview here. Every resource has teaching tips in the support materials, which is just a pop-up here that describes each of the resources and how you can use them. There are discussion questions that you can ask either before or after you've shown the video. That's a great way to get the most spark from your spark is to ask some questions before they watch and then follow up after. We also have a background reading page, which is a PDF with some history of the park. Teachers either read this themselves and use it to share the information with kids, or they print it off, and it's a great send home. I don't know how many times my kids have handed me a field trip permission slip and told me to sign it. And I've said, "Where are you going?" And they will say, "I don't know." Or they will say, where they're going, and I'll say, well, what will you learn there? Why are you going there? And they will say, I don't know. So I don't know what gets lost. I'm sure they're told, but for some reason they just don't hear it, I guess. So sending the background reading list home with the permission slip is a great trick, because it also helps families prepare and talk about that experience with their kids and follow up with them about what they were to learn. The other one that we have had a lot of fun with is the visitation checklist. So the idea would be that you either printed this and had kids check this off while they're visiting the park, so that they could keep track of what they see, or they could check it off when you got back, if you didn't want to deal with printed materials while you were on a field trip. So every park has one of those visitation checklists. I'm going to show this video because it's new and I'm super excited about it, and to just give you a feel for what these overview videos are all about. And again, remember, think about Spark, think about getting kids excited. And when I tell my students, when they're producing these videos and they're trying to think about the concept and how to organize them, I always say, think of it as a hype video for the park. You know, you want them to get really excited about something other than riding the bus. Like, let's get them really excited about the place that they're going. So I'll go ahead and hit play, and have you see the video.
What Montana State Park used to be part of an ancient sea, contains over 30,000 excavated artifacts, and has cave drawings that can be traced back 2,000 years? Let's dig into the past and explore Pictograph Cave State Park on PBS Learning Media. Located just miles from Billings, these sandstone cliffs rise up over the prairie and contain 3 main caves where you can find links to native peoples. Tribes had profound cultural and spiritual connections to this place and used it to record symbolic messages called pictographs that you can see today. When the site was excavated in the 1940s, archaeologists found items ranging from clay pots to tools and weapons. Take a walking tour on the park's loop trail and view the pictographs for yourself. Look out for rattlesnakes and other wildlife that frequent the area. Stay and enjoy the interpretive displays at the visitor center and enjoy a picnic. How will the past speak to you at this historic landmark? Take a peek into history at Pictograph Cave State Park.
All right, and the other piece that we have is you can turn the captions on. So each of those has captions. My little hack was if I had kids in the room and I was trying to do some planning or some video preview and I didn't want them to hear the video, I would turn the captions on and turn the sound off, and then I could see what the video was about. But we've also found that to be a really great accessibility tool for students. These ones also have a transcript. And so teachers have found that printing the transcript helps them with their planning and knowing what the video is about. But it's also something that students can follow along with or use for close reading, or another way to get that out, to get more out of the viewing experience. Not all videos on the site have those options. They should have captions. They don't all have transcripts, but most of them do. This one is a stream only, but as some videos on the site are also downloadable. You can see that we can add it to Google Classroom as well. And there is a student view of this site that you can toggle on, which kind of just takes away some of the teaching tips and the teacher materials, and just allows the students to see the site that looks like this, that can be shared with students if you were to share it in your Google Classroom. So hopefully you enjoyed that and that you'll be excited to share those videos. We're really looking for teachers this fall who will share some of these videos and share with us how it goes in your classroom, because it's one thing to make them. It's another to tell people they exist, and then another to find out if they're actually effective. So we're really looking for your help on that one. So that is my explanation of Spark. I'm going to turn it over to Traci. Traci, should I just let you share the screen so you have?
Yeah.
Let me take away my screen here.
Good.
And you can take over sharing the screen.
Awesome.
And all the people who are here. So much fun.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any questions on that before I dive into the sharing piece? Any thoughts, questions for Nikki on the PBS Media, no, I'm saying Media Lab, um, learning media, or that Parks collection? So awesome. I shared that with a few other teachers, Nikki, and they were so excited. One thing about the learning media site is there's so much stuff there. So that's why I love that you're going to have a chunk of time here pretty soon to just kind of dig into some things, because I think some people, maybe they've heard of it, but just until you really dedicate a chunk of time to really digging in and investigating and seeing what's there, I don't think we realize the amount of resources that are on that site. So you'll have some time later. Hopefully you'll spend some of that digging into that website. So we're going to talk about sharing, and particularly thinking about how we share student learning, but really in kind of a student-centered way. And by that, we mean how are we kind of empowering our students to be the ones that are sharing that thinking, and all the sense making that they're doing in their class. So before we kind of dig in, we want to know what some of the ways that you communicate and share with families are. You can unmute and just share out. If you want to put it in the chat, go ahead and put it in the chat. But some ways that you communicate and share with families, this could be digital or non-digital. So it doesn't have to be digital ways. So I'm just going to kind of peek at the chat real quickly. And again, if you want to just unmute and share, you can sure do that too. Seesaw. Oh, I love it. Lots of seesaw. Awesome. So Seesaw, Class Dojo. It could be emails. It could be newsletters, phone calls. Do people make phone calls anymore? I never make phone calls unless it's absolutely necessary.
Last thing I want to do.
I was doing an order for this preschool program here the other day, and they needed to communicate, and I was doing everything I could. I kept like emailing them, and they're like, really, we'd prefer if you call us. Took me like 3 extra days to do it just because I had to call them.
Yeah. The paid
I
is
like it, Shannon. Just that face-to-face communication at pickup.
yeah.
She calls. Shannon, you're my hero.
Our school was little. We were a really small K-8. And so we didn't have buses. And so we put kids in their cars at the end of the day, every day. And there were times when I was like, oh, I don't like doing this. But sometimes that was like some of the best, like quick, positive communication I could have with a family. And I knew what all their cars looked like.
Spot them around town.
Yeah.
I love that. So lots of digital and non-digital ways of communicating. I think a balance is probably best. When we talk about those digital communication tools, there is a link here to this Padlet. I'm just going to click on it and open it up. Can you guys see that Padlet now? Just making sure. Okay. And we'll drop that link in here. If you're on the slides, you can click in here. Some of the more frequently used digital platforms are listed here. This was from another session, and we thought we're just going to kind of leave these answers and ideas in here because it might spark some thinking for yourself. But just sort of taking a minute to look through these different columns, what some of the pros and cons of using some of these tools might be. If you have your own thoughts or ideas, you can click on that plus sign so that you can add into any of these columns here, as well as some of the pros and cons of using some of these digital tools. The ones that are on here now are Remind. I think most of us are familiar with Remind. Class Dojo, is everyone pretty familiar with Class Dojo? Bloom's, I think, is probably one that maybe people are least familiar with. It is similar to Remind, I would say. I think it has some extra features in there. The thing that some people say they really like is there's some scheduling pieces in there. Like I could schedule my parent-teacher conferences, and it has kind of an embedded way of doing that. You know, like I need these things for the party, that sort of thing. Seesaw, a lot of you are familiar with Seesaw. Newsletters, again, those could be digital or non-digital. Google Voice is on here. Again, kind of just a way of maybe making phone calls. Without actually making phone calls from your own personal phone, so everybody has your phone number. So just sharing in here, if you've used any of these tools, what you think maybe some of the pros and cons of these tools would be. I'm just going to kind of scroll and look here. One of the cons, I guess, that I'll mention as we're sort of glancing through here kind of relates back here. How can we support families in using digital tools? I know here in Billings, maybe something that parents would say is a con in some ways is sort of the oversaturation of too many tools. Some teachers are using Remind, some are putting in stuff on Seesaw. We started using a new platform district-wide called Parent Square. I know some schools use Dojo because of the points in Dojo. And I do see where you kind of hit that threshold of like, I can't manage or maintain one more platform. So I guess my answer to that is trying to find some kind of consistency. And I know that that can be difficult sometimes in a school environment. Just sort of, if you're being told you have to use this, that, or the other thing in addition to what you already have in place. But I do think the consistency of posting in one particular space so that your parents sort of know where you're going to be sharing is really important. I do think it can sometimes get a little bit overwhelming. However, I also don't miss the day of the backpack stuffed full of papers and notes and field trip slips and all those sorts of things that really do just kind of get lost in there. So I think a real a pro of the digital communication is I do think that it's probably more well organized. It's easier to find some of those things. We don't have all those loose papers and that sort of thing. So pros and cons. Any other ideas? I'm scrolling through here. You can pop in the chat as well if you want to pop things into the chat.
Taylor, I don't know if you'd be interested in sharing more or elaborating on what you said about you're currently using Seesaw, but you want to switch to Remind or phone calls. If you have some, I'd be curious about the justification for that. Is it a simplicity thing or you can put it in the chat box.
Yeah.
I will say we collected the feedback on this Padlet quite a while ago. I think it was maybe even 4 years ago that I first gathered these comments. And so some of these things in the cons could be dated. The app may have improved and added more features. Lindy's talking about Remind that you can communicate to one or all. I like that as well. And sending pictures and videos. Erica, I'm with you. When we have too many flat platforms and too many different things, it's really hard to keep it all straight. And I heard that a lot from schools, especially if they had kids in one district, but at different buildings. If this building was using this and that building was using this, it's hard. I even have that issue with Infinite Campus where my kid's school uses Infinite Campus, but often I'll get a message, but I don't know which school it's from. So something as clear as like saying where the message is originating so I know like which kid it's about can be confusing. Wow.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Taylor, said seesaw is too informal. Interesting. A lot of messages from parents outside of school, and they're expecting a response right away. And that almost makes things too accessible. Interesting perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah, that is interesting. Okay, I'm going to show you this really fast.
Okay.
So just so you know, you can set office hours in Seesaw. Doesn't stop them from being able to message you, but it would give them a little message that says, you know, this teacher will respond during their office hours or whatever. So your notifications would be muted, that kind of thing. I totally get it. Just showing you that piece.
Yeah.
And I'm on the Seesaw Facebook group quite a bit, and I think this applies to everything besides Seesaw, but there are lots of interesting posts about that parent messaging piece there where, again, not particularly Seesaw. I think any of those messaging apps make teachers feel like they have to be accessible to families at all times. And it's interesting seeing some of those discussions on there, because then there are other teachers who are like, no, I mean, you just have to set those boundaries. And if they set it at a certain time, like, you have to put those boundaries in place where you're not responding until, you know, whatever time suits you and that sort of thing. So I do think there's some interesting discussions there about this digital communication has made it where teachers are a lot more accessible to parents. And so how do we kind of put those boundaries in there so that we're not responding to those messages and emails and that sort of thing at all times? I think that's a really good point.
Mhm.
And then supporting families and using those digital tools. And I think a part of this too goes back to if we're using platforms that our students are comfortable with. And again, I bring up Seesaw just because that's what we use and I'm super comfortable with. But as our students are empowered to utilize that to share their learning, they could help. You know, we have had lots of open houses and teacher nights and things like that where the students themselves can actually kind of be supporting their families, because it's a tool then that the student is also familiar with using, and it's not all on the teacher's shoulders to be doing all that sharing and communicating. So that's kind of what our focus of this conversation this morning will hopefully be, is how can we kind of empower those students to be sharing their learning in authentic ways. Seesaw would be one of those. We're going to share a few other ideas on here as well. There's a link to an article here that I think is really great. Just kind of talking about, I think we know a lot of this, but just sort of talking about empowering, I guess, those strong parent-teacher relationships, because we know that that's really beneficial to student success. And again, we're really going to kind of focus in on students being able to explain what they're learning. When my daughter was younger, she's going to be in 8th grade now, but in elementary school, her teachers did use Seesaw quite a bit and used it really in pretty authentic ways, where she's taking videos, she's telling me what she's doing, sharing those pieces. So I'm hearing from her what she's learning, what she's doing. Her teacher didn't really need to make phone calls, or even at our parent teacher conferences, didn't have to do a lot of that explaining, because I had heard it straight from my daughter, right? So giving them that platform to be able to really share that thinking and learning, I think, is a pretty powerful thing for us as parents to be able to hear as well. As the families, then we get to see what's being taught, what are they doing, kind of like what Nikki was talking about with, if you're going on a field trip, why, what are you learning, what are you doing? It provides some of that transparency. Yeah. Do you even know where it is? And how we as parents then can support our students. I think this is becoming big. Maybe not something that here in Montana, we've had a huge influx of, ELL students here in Billings. And so these language barriers with students and with families, digital tools, I think, are a perfect way to sort of bridge those barriers. And that participation piece in the classroom, I really like that they don't have to be here maybe they can't come and volunteer physically or have those conversations, but to be able to like and comment on their students' posts and be able to kind of be involved in the classroom in that way, I think is really important. So we're going to kind of pop into this student-centered sharing conversation. I'm going to throw some ideas and examples out there, and then you'll have some time to just sort of explore, hopefully, some of these tools, something that sort of sparks your interest that you want to learn a little bit more about. But if we're empowering our students to use these technology tools to share, what we're really asking them to do is create. And, when Nikki and I kind of first started using, we can say we're pioneers, I guess, right, with all this technology. But when we first started using those digital tools, I really do feel like the focus was so much more on creating, students making things to share what they know and share their learning. As it's evolved, it's become so much more of these online programs, a little bit more sit and get kind of things. And so really bringing that focus back onto creating. And I think it ties into that media literacy piece, that screen time piece. If they're on screens, what do we want them doing? We don't necessarily just want them sitting there watching, clicking buttons. We want them kind of synthesizing information and creating and making and doing things. And when they do that, they've also then made something that can be shared with their classmates, with their teachers, with their families to really authentically show their learning. So these are some of the tools that I'm going to highlight with a couple of examples. This obviously isn't an extensive list. I'd love if you have other ideas for creation apps and tools that you've used in your classrooms that you want to drop in the chat box and just kind of share out. I'm going to kind of talk through what each of these are and then show a few examples. They're not all free. I'm kind of looking at this list here. I think actually most of them are free. So that's good. I did okay there. Some of them are video making tools. And when we really think about how technology has sort of redefined and transformed what we can do in our classrooms, videos, I think, really come out on top. Being able to, again, just have our students kind of make something, create something, explain their thinking, really gives us insight into what they know. So some of these video creation tools, I think, can be a really nice way of allowing them to share their learning. So Apple Clips is an app. So that's the one thing with that. It has to be used on an iPad. It is a free video making tool. There is a little Clips tutorial linked here that I think is kind of a helpful little tool. And again, I'll show you an example in a second. There's some fun things in here. They call them posters, and they're kind of these fun moving title pages. Kids really love this because it lets them make this video that looks super cool and grown up and professional, but they can do that to share a reflection on their learning. They just read this book, tell about the book that they read. They just learned about an animal, do a video telling all about what you learned about this animal. They can use it in so many different ways, and they really love using it to share their learning. The Adobe Creative Express, that whole suite of tools is another way of students can be kind of making videos to share their thinking and share their learning. So this one is free if your school sets it up. So we kind of had to go through a process. They did sign a data privacy agreement, and then our district was able to set this up, I believe, through Clever, but you could get it set up through your emails as well. So our students have access to this for free, and all of the tools that are in this Adobe Express Creative Cloud area, they have access to this for free. Same as Canva. We had been using Canva for years and years as teachers, but there are student tools in Canva as well, where students can be making videos, creating posters, to share their thinking and learning. So this is another one that you might kind of want to investigate. Through your district, you could get a free subscription for your teachers and your students into Canva, but it's something that you would have to get set up through your district in order for your students to have access to that for free. So those are just kind of some pricing considerations, I guess, with those two. Chatterpix, Collage EDU, Pixton, Seesaw, and Class Dojo are all other tools that I think are great for sharing. I'm just going to kind of pop over to this next slide here so we can look at a few examples of some of these. Pixton is this one in the middle. Sorry, I did this like giant slide. I was trying to like not make very many slides, but in the process made one like giant collage. Just to kind of give you like a little taste here, I guess, of what these different things can do. This one's wanting to play. I'm going to click on play. See what's happening here. This is an example of an Apple Clips video. It's just kind of, okay, I'm going to leave it alone. We'll see what it does. The kind of comic image up here is Pixton. That's the one that I put on there that actually is not a free program. Pixton is an avatar maker and comic maker. It's pretty unique, and so it is one that if you dig into it, kind of play around with it a little bit and think that it might be something that you would use, I think it might be worth, a lot of our teachers will write like a PTA grant or something like that just to get that paid for. But this one is a paid program, but it allows students to create these avatar characters of themselves and then create comics. It's a pretty cool program to be able to illustrate stories that they've written, kind of tell information about something maybe that they've been learning. When you're talking about sparking and sharing together, this really sparks their interest. They love using the comic maker. They love using the avatars. It really does get them excited to share what they're thinking and learning. They can then be downloaded and shared out in different platforms, Google Classroom, Seesaw, a website, whatever is a way that you're kind of sharing out what your students are making, those can be put there. So Pixton is kind of a cool one. If you want to just play around, it does let you sign up, I think, and sort of play with it for like a week or two for free. So you would be able to kind of dig in there and check it out. I'm wondering why this is still spinning. But this, hopefully if you have the slides open, maybe it will let you kind of play. This is just an example of what that clips video would look like. These are just sort of posters or collages. So again, you'll see students are using Canva, or this one is Pick Collage EDU, which is an app where they're just kind of using lots of multimodal tools. We're putting in stickers and pictures and fonts and maybe our voice in there, just to, again, take pieces of our learning and share that. Instead of a teacher, writing out in a newsletter or maybe just a paper coming home, you see here that the student has created something to really show and share that learning that they're doing. So not only are we sharing that learning, but the student has been really empowered to create something that can then be, again, shared with teacher, classmates, families, so that we really see that insight into what the students know. I'm going to click on this one and see what it does. This is a little Chatterpix. I don't know if it'll just spin too. We'll blame it on BPS Wi-Fi, our network. It's got to be, right? So
I think videos from slides, like that's kind of how it goes.
They just don't want to. They just don't want to. Hopefully on yours, you can click that and play. Chatterpix is such a quick, easy way for students to kind of share their thinking. Snap a picture, draw a mouth, and then they share out, tell one fact that you learned about, this animal that you drew, or retell your favorite part of a story. There's just a quick and easy way, again, for them to create and be empowered to share that learning. These two examples are from Seesaw. I think we've gotten in the habit where we do lots of like activities and we're kind of just doing worksheets and that sort of thing on Seesaw. And I think we can't forget the power of just letting students take pictures, label what's happening in this picture. They're learning about insects, so they built insects out of clay or Play-Doh. Take a picture of that and then label what's happening, or use the microphone to tell what's happening. Use those drawing tools on a digital platform to be able to share. Here the second graders were going to the zoo, and so they're reflecting on the animals that they're going to see at the zoo. So again, just kind of a collage of lots of different digital tools that students could be using, so that they are the ones sharing. The teacher hopefully isn't having to always be the person that's sharing, but if we're empowering our students to kind of create and make these things, then they can be sharing their learning in those ways. I haven't had a chance to glance in the chat. Have there been other tools shared that teachers are using to kind of empower your students to share their learning?
I don't think we have any comments in the chat right now, but if anybody wanted to share, they'd be invited to right now.
I gotta get off of this slide where it doesn't even want me to get off anymore. I'm gonna share this really quick, and then I think this might be a good time just to pause, and I'll put that slide back up with lots of those ideas where we can kind of dig in and explore. But this piece just kind of talks about those routines. We talked about it a little bit just in that consistency. I think when we choose to let our students share, the most important thing is just being consistent and then just kind of creating those routines. Because again, we don't want it to be more work for you as a teacher. Up front, it might be, front loading these kind of routines and how this works so that your students are empowered to do that. But the ultimate goal here is that they can do this independently. So once we sort of have those routines in place, they should be able to take those pictures, add their voice using the microphone, and tell about what they made or what they did, without teachers having to kind of handhold every step of that way. So whatever those routines look like for your students in your classroom, just being consistent, and just providing some guidelines. This I snapped. I thought this was a great example of an anchor chart. This was in a kindergarten classroom here in Billings, where students, they kind of started by teaching them how to use Seesaw because it sort of does that double duty. Students can create in it, but then also it shares directly with families pretty easily. So showing their kids kind of, here's what you're going to do first, next, then last, and these great pictures so students can really look at this anchor chart and follow this on their own. So they have that space to share their learning. We're using all these multimodal tools. They know how to use the camera and the microphone and the drawing tool to share that different thinking. Anchor charts to make that really broke down and specific for the kids. And then again, just that consistent use. If I show them how to use Seesaw or Canva or Pick Collage, this week, and then we don't use it again for 4 more months, they're not going to remember how to use that. And it's going to be starting all over again. So if we want students to be empowered to share, that consistent use of tools, and that doesn't have to mean every day, it just means consistent. Maybe they're posting once a week, and that's fine. Maybe they're in Canva once a week, or they get to work on a Pixton every Friday. It doesn't really matter how much that time is, as long as it's consistent and they're in it, over that period of time so that they know how to use those tools. And then thinking through that piece of how you are going to connect with families. If that's not embedded right in, once they make those chatter picks, how do families get to see that? Maybe it's putting it on a Padlet like we had up here. I could add those onto a Padlet and share that with families. I could put it in Google Classroom. I could put it in an email. I could put it in Seesaw. Again, it doesn't matter, I don't think, as much what it is as that it's a tool that you're comfortable using, and you're consistent about using it. So families know this is where I'm going to go check to see this information, because when they get overwhelmed, that's when I think they get a little bit checked out because they're not exactly sure where to go and check for all of that information. So those consistent routines, I think, are really important. Nikki, any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, a few things came up that I remembered. When I taught fourth and fifth grade, the last year I was in the classroom, I taught fourth and fifth grade. And we had a regular part of our week called Makerspace. And it was like a really free exploration time where kids got to use different materials and work on these sort of self-paced independent projects. And they were starting things and finishing them. And when they'd start something and pick something else up again. And it was a very beloved time of our classroom. But of course, the challenge for me was the accountability of creating these things, but then also wanting to share them with families. And so the solution for that for me was we used Google Sites. And I think that's a tool we haven't put on here, but each of my students created a Google site devoted to our Makerspace time. And because it was in our Google Suite, it was easy for them to find it and edit it within our Drive. And the rule was that when they finished a Makerspace project, whether it was cooking or a sewing or an illustration or a video they created, they had to put it on the Makerspace site. It was kind of like a portfolio site. And they had to caption it with whatever it was and what they learned and a reflection about what that project was. And then I had because we published them as websites, I had a link to each of those sites that lived on a Google Doc. And when it came time to share with the families that I wanted to have, you have these big ideas that you're gonna have this cumulative event. And I'm going to invite the families into my classroom and we are going to put all these projects up on the desks and they're going to tour and they're going to touch and they're going to see all the things we did during Makerspace. And what really happens is the last week of school, which is field trips and field days and award ceremonies. And it's like, oh, I cannot host an event on top of all of this stuff. So what we ended up doing instead was I just shared this Google Doc in an email that's like, here is the link to everyone's Makerspace website. Please sit with your student and take a look at their own site as well as a couple of their peers and respond to this email to let me know. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was amazing because it was student-centered sharing. The students created the website, the students put the content on there, the students created the content. And then it just like got sent off to the teacher or to the families. And then I didn't have to host a big event, but because I asked for some feedback, most of the families responded with, questions or excitement and things like that. So I think there are a lot of ways. It doesn't have to be every single thing we do needs to be shared, because certainly not everything we do needs to be shared or should be shared, but there are some things that really do spark interest for families and really do. And for a lot of the families that I had, Makerspace was something they talked about at the dinner table and that the kids were always talking about. And so it was really fun for them to see the visuals of what that time was like in our classroom and what different students were creating. So that's just another anecdote that I kind of came up for me along this whole idea of sharing.
I love that. And I think too that authentic audience piece for our students is such an important, I think they get more motivated to create and share their learning when they know somebody's going to be looking at it, whether it's their families or their peers or whoever it is, but they do get really excited when they know that's going to be published and shared to an audience.
Yeah, I always said nothing would make a kid go back and revise their writing quicker than when they took their writing over to the iPad and started to record themselves reading it. They could suddenly they're like, well, I can't read this.
Right.
You know, it was like,
just
and
have
it was so much more effective than when I said it.
Exactly.
So yeah, so it is a really cool tool, and a cool way to help kids do that for themselves.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I might add on here Google Sites. I like that idea. We'll add that on here. We'd really like to just give you some time to explore. These are some ideas. So I'm on what slide am I on? 13. So if you have the presentation in front of you, I'm on slide number 13. I think all of the links to these tools were dropped into the chat box as well. But these are just some ideas. Again, kind of like Nikki said at the beginning, sometimes when we learn about these, it's like, this is cool, and this is cool, and this is cool. And we want to try all of the things. Start with one, like kind of click through and see what each of these tools do and which one you think might be really interesting for your students or something that you could see your students using, and kind of explore just one of those to see what you think. If it's something like Canva or Adobe Express and you're not here in Billings and you don't have access to those right now for free, maybe take a few minutes to figure out how you could get this to your IT department and see if it's something that they would set up for you so you would have access to. So checking in on these, or again, that PBS Learning Media site, just some time hopefully you'll have now to just kind of dig in and explore. And then when we come back together, we'll have you share out a little bit sort of what you discovered or learned, or a tool that you could see yourself utilizing in your classroom. I'm going to add this on here really fast.
Yeah, so Tracy and I will mute and turn off our cameras, and we'll invite you to do the same. We'll give you about, I would say, 15 minutes. I'll set a timer to just play and explore. You're also welcome to get up and stretch your legs, get a drink of water, and take a break from looking at the screen for a couple minutes if you need to do that too. But we will ask you when we come back in 15 minutes to tell us either in the chat box or to unmute and share, something you looked at, and just what you think you could do with that, or an idea that popped up while you were exploring those resources. And we'll have a Padlet for you to type, to share out on as well. So we'll be here if you have questions. But feel free to just go ahead and mute and explore those tools. Welcome back. I hope you had a chance to explore a few things. Probably just scratched the surface for a lot of this, but if anything, it was a chance to just take a break from listening to us talk. We've been putting some links in the chat box for a Padlet. I had to quick update it because I apologize. It had some things on there we didn't want. You can find it on slide 17, a link to Padlet, or Ruby has put it in the chat box. And so we're just wondering if you'll share any resources that you found on PBS Learning Media. This serves a couple things. First, it allows you to share with your peers something that you found, but it also provides me with a little bit of feedback about what it is that grabs your eye and what kinds of resources that you're interested in. And that helps us as we continue to build content for this site. And then thinking about next school year, maybe you don't want to because the last one's just ended, but hopefully that maybe you got some ideas, some sparks came up for you. We put 2 things on there, but if you could only come up with 1, but if you want to really be a rock star and give us even more than 2, that would be awesome. And yes, Padlet is another one of my favorites. I'll actually say of so many of tools that do this keep going away, like Jamboard is going away. And I'm still like mourning the loss of Jamboard coming up here. Padlet seems to have remained pretty consistent. It does have like you can only make a certain number of Padlets before they want you to pay. And I just keep repurposing the same ones. So I just use it and then content down. And did you know that, Lindy, about Jamboard? Isn't that a bummer? Like I've been in denial for a while and I'm still using it for some things. For whatever reason, Google has decided that Jamboard is just not a good tool anymore and they're taking it out. I think October is the last time that it will be part of the Google Suite. And we have until that time to find something new, which is the things that they offered up are not as cool. So a little frustrating. But please feel free to just add your comments first about things you found on learning media, and then anything about parent communication that came up for you while we were talking, and then the tools for student-centered sharing. The other cool thing about Padlet you might notice is that I can leave comments for people. I can leave these little reactions. We can have a little asynchronous conversation around some of these tools here. So we'll just give you a few minutes to just post some things to the Padlet. If Padlet's not working or you're having a hard time logging into that, the chat box works really well for this part of the workshop as well. Lots of love for ChatterPix. ChatterPix was one of my favorites because it was just so easy to use, especially with the iPads in the room. The thing I loved to do it was we had art teachers come in for like artists in residence, and they would come in and make these lovely art pieces with the students, but they often wanted to keep the pieces to either display them somewhere in the building or to save them for an art auction and things like that. And it was hard for kids to, because they want to take their work home and share it with their parents. They want to, like, art especially is something that they really want to share. And so that's where we either used iPads to either just take a picture and we could share the picture in different ways, but it was really fun to use ChatterPix and say, okay, we're going to make your art talk. We're going to have whatever you created, tell the story of what we did. And so I remember they were in one lesson, they actually painted chickens, which was really fun. I can't remember what they were learning, but they painted these really lovely, colorful chickens. And so they drew the little line to make the chicken talk. And then had the chicken say funny things. And that was a really, and it was nice because then the kids could tell their parents about art that day before they had a chance, because they didn't usually get to bring their work home for a few weeks after they actually created it. Oh, Tiffany, yeah, Chromebooks versus iPads. Tracy, do you like, yeah, I feel that pain because I think iPads make creating so much easier.
Okay. This can go down there with it.
I know, I agree, especially the photo part, Tiffany. They can take pictures. It's just, it's not as easy, like it's not as mobile, but they can do it. I've been doing some work in a second grade class with Chromebooks, and even we found these little like kind of mirror things that go over top of the camera. I'm not sure how to explain it. And that kind of helped us with being able to take pictures a little bit more easily. I think there's more and more apps now too, so you can get into the Google Play Store on the Chromebooks. There are some things like ChatterPix is one that now that I say that, I'm almost certain ChatterPix is one that we have in the Google Play Store, that then they could put, I know like Scratch Junior is in there, and there's some other ones in there that they can use on the Chromebook. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just different, but it kind of goes back again to those routines and consistency. So as they get used to doing it, it's, you know, it'll be fine for them. It is just kind of diving in and doing it. But I have found I have to give it more time. It just takes a little bit more time because it's just not quite as user friendly on the Chromebooks, but they can certainly do it.
Yeah, I think when I had 4th and 5th grade and we used the Chromebooks, anything with the camera, we did have to think through like setting it up so that, you know, we could get the right stuff from the camera. And often they needed to work with partners to have one person hold up whatever it is they were filming or watching, and then another person hit something on it took a little bit more thought and problem solving, but I actually looked at it as that way. It's like, we've got a big problem. Let's figure out how to solve it. Let's see who can come up with the most efficient way to do this. And they really, actually, it was pretty impressive, some of the stuff that they could do if I framed it that way.
When you're challenging them.
Yeah.
ChatterPix Kids, there's a Google Play app, so that could be installed on a Chromebook. So there are some things, it's just digging in and giving it a try and being a little patient at first.
Yeah. I think screencasting is something that Chromebooks allows, is easier to do. So if you use tools like Screencastify or Loom, I think is another great tool for having kids just record whatever's on their screen and then talk over top of what they're doing. And so kids really loved, in my room, creating a slide presentation with something they had learned and then talking through each of those slides and recording themselves on each of those and creating a video that way. And that was what Chromebooks were great for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see, I'm gonna go back to our slideshow. So thanks for sharing on that Padlet. It's fun to see all your thoughtful responses and can tell that you used your Explore time to really get the most out of it. So thank you. We have some final thoughts about communication. You know, there's many types of ways we can share with digital tools. One is this like informing parents and keeping parents in the loop. And the others is this student-centered approach to having students share what they're learning. And so that the digital tool provides that window into the classroom that is really unique and authentic. But the part where we use digital tools to improve and enhance our relationship with families is something that I mean, even toward the end of my time in the classroom was something I really still struggled with to do it the right way. And it sort of changed depending on the group of people that I worked with every year. But it is possible. And I think it is a foundation that can be built. It just takes some time. But I also think it's a-okay. Like we always start the year with really the best of intentions and great guns. And we say, I'm going to send an email every Friday. And I'm in the email, it's going to be like what we're teaching and things that are coming up. And then like February happens and you forgot that you ever made that promise. And like all of that is fine. I think it is totally fine in February to email some parents and say, this isn't working anymore. Here's what I'm going to try this time. And you're only human. And so I think it's okay to alter your plan, alter your communication plan. And Traci mentioned it earlier about having some boundaries about communication. And I think it's really important to communicate that I'm available during these hours and I don't check my email after these hours. And that's because I have a family and a personal life as well. And I'll thank you for respecting that. And obviously there is a situation that alters that every single time. But the teachers that I know who do this at the beginning of the year and make their online time really known, and say, this is how you can contact me, and this is when you can contact me, and this is what you can expect to hear from me when I do contact you, have the most success with parents. But I mean, they do make it hard. Like, I'm not saying that that's a foolproof way. They do make it hard sometimes. But consistency, it's just mostly consistency, but you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have a perfect digital product for every project that you do. Like sometimes we're just happy the unit ended so we can move on to the next one. And it's okay that we didn't share it in a cool and authentic way. So those are just our little tips and tricks that we wanted to share. Looks like we got some cool stuff coming up in the chat box. Thank you for all of you saying that you're excited about the state parks resources. That means a lot to me. We've worked so hard on those. And I'll pass that along to our team. I know they'll be really excited to hear that feedback and the materials there. So yeah, thanks for that feedback. That's fun to hear. All right, so in this part, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of our other opportunities for professional development with PBS, with Montana PBS. Some of you have already participated in this one, and I encourage you to stay connected and keep watch, because we are going to be adding more content to this one. This is a opportunity called Watch and Learn, and what it is we have a menu of, or a catalog of films that have been produced mostly by Montana PBS. And each film has a collection of resources from the PBS Learning Media on the PBS Learning Media website. And so we are giving OPI credit to teachers who watch the films and then fill out a Google form, that is a reflection activity. And part of that reflection activity is reviewing the learning media collection and taking a look at some of the teaching resources that go with the film. So on this slide, it sort of describes what this is about. This is asynchronous PD, meaning you can do this anytime, anywhere, and there's no deadline. It's always available. You do it at your own pace. And as how it works is you click here and you go look at the catalog and think about which films you might want to watch. We've got them of varying lengths and in different content areas. And as I said, most of them have been produced here in Montana by our team. Many of them have recently won awards for being outstanding films. Higgins Ridge won some awards last year. Mavericks won awards the year before. Ivan Doig has won several awards just recently. So they're really good films. And then if you can see here, there's a Google form linked in this catalog. And so what you do is you fill that Google form out and tell me which films you want to watch. And then I will email you links to the films and the reflection activities. And you'll get them all. Like even if you only want to watch a couple, you'll still get them all. Maybe you'll change your mind. And then I go through and read your responses, make sure you answer all the questions, make sure that you provide enough detail. And then I email you the OPI certificate. Sometimes it takes me a couple of days to get to all the responses. And I like to say that because I think some teachers think it's like automatic, but it's not. It's me. And so I get the email, look at the responses, I review them. Those of you in Billings, we do have this approved for your step up. And so that's why I make sure that I review everything, because I promised your district that I would, so that you get that credit. So you can go through, we've got, like I said, there's a lot of different content areas, a lot of different topics can be explored. Some of you, if you've done this last summer, since then we've added these two, The Story of Us and Evelyn Cameron. So even if you've already done some of the earlier ones, these two are relatively new. I don't know about trade hours, Lindy. Maybe Traci can explain it. They're approved for Step Up. Watch and Learn is in Step Up. Is that the same as trade hours, Traci?
No, because
Okay.
to make everything very complicated. So if you did put in a special request for trade, I think those go to a committee now. So if you haven't heard back, it might just be because the committee hasn't met yet. But if they're approved for Step Up, I think it's a pretty good bet that they would be fine for trade. It just has to officially go through a committee now.
And make sure when you put it in your stuff that you call it Montana PBS Watch and Learn. We've had a hang up that some people have put like the title of the film they watched, and then your district gets a hold of me and they're like, what is this? Like, was this another workshop that you did that you didn't tell us about? So like try to call it the same title that I call it. And that might help as well. I will say these Media Lab workshops we have approved for Watch and Learn as well. And these, so as long as you call it those things, it should go through all right. I am going to be adding a couple more films later this summer. And I'm going to show you the one film that I'll be adding just because I'm excited that it's also a new resource, and Ruby helped me build this one. It's called Native Ball. And it is the story of Malia Kipp, if you're familiar with her. She is one of the first Native American women to get a full ride Division I basketball scholarship at the University of Montana. And this is a 27-minute film about her journey playing Grizzly basketball, and just sort of the experience that she had back in the 90s doing that. I'm in the process of adding this film to the Watch and Learn so that you can watch it and get credit. Because the film is only 27 minutes, you'd only get 1 credit for watching this film and then doing the reflection activity. But it's really, really good. And the teaching materials that go along with this one were developed by a professor at University of Montana, and she worked with teachers and students to build them. So they're really, really good. So we'll add that to Watch and Learn. And I think that's everything. Oh, we have I think maybe I forgot to, Ruby, will you put the link to our professional development website for Montana PBS that I was showing you this morning? We do have a website where we list all of our professional development. So we have 2 more workshops in this series, and then starting in July, we'll be doing our hiding in plain sight mental health workshops. We have 3 of those coming up in July, and we'll be tackling some different topics and have some different guest speakers. So if you haven't registered for those yet, we'd love to have you do that.